Good afternoon. Thank you for coming and visiting us with Welcoming Wellness today, where we are empowering mental health. I'm Robin, and I'm going to be your guide today, I guess is a good word, through your presentation. And the purpose of this initiative is to provide education and resources for caregivers and people with mental illness, and also to create a community where people feel free to come forward without stigma if they need help. So that's what we're about at Welcoming Wellness. So I think that takes care of our housekeeping items. And today we're going to hear from Sarah Merritt Ryan. And Sarah has lived experience in mental health. And I'm going to let her tell you her story and talk about, she is an author, and talk about her book and talk about what she does to remain well. So let's give Sarah a big hand.
Hi, good to see all of you today. So my name is Sarah Merritt Ryan. I am originally from Cary. I'm a Cary native, which is very unusual for someone my age. I write a blog for Psychology Today called Healing Mind, and this blog has been republished by the UNC School of Medicine, which is an honor. I live in Apex now. I made a big move from Cary to Apex. And I have a husband, a son, and 2 rescue dogs. And I'm a speaker now. I speak at NC State University each semester. I'll be speaking to UNC Psychiatry in a few days. And I've also made a couple presentations on NAMI North Carolina, through NAMI North Carolina online. I'm going to tell you about my story. And it's a difficult story. It's a story where I have had 4 psychotic breaks, but I have made a full emotional and cognitive recovery. And the reason I speak, the reason I write, is because of how difficult, emotionally speaking, my illness has been. And cognitive recovery from psychosis is something not everyone achieves. And while it's very important, the emotional aspect of it is just as important. The reason I write my blog on Psychology Today is because I want other people to read what I wish I could have read in those early years of recovery, because people with my illness suffer in silent shame and secrecy due to stigma. And there is no reason why this illness has to be as bad as it really is due to stigma, when it doesn't have to be like that if it's simply a medical illness and nothing more. And that's my goal. My goal is to create community through open conversations where people like me can say, yes, I've been diagnosed with schizophrenia, where I don't judge myself and other people don't judge me either. And, my dream is maybe even the next few years, the stigma surrounding schizophrenia, where it's something much more subjective than just a medical illness, will go away. So that's my ultimate goal. I want to talk to people who have my diagnosis, clinicians who treat people with my condition, and also community members, family members, friends, partners that need to gain insight into this early recovery process, because this is a unique kind of pain that not everyone understands. It is a very profound pain where people who have psychosis deserve survivor status just for being alive after a psychotic break, but also surviving the emotional toll that it takes. So before I get started, I'm going to read an excerpt from my memoir. So I have a full-length memoir currently represented by a literary agent, and this is the first 2 pages. The title of chapter 1 is Not a Death Sentence, and it starts out in 2012. My toes are wet and numb from walking in flats in the light rain as I put one foot in front of the other on the concrete sidewalk on a cold December day. The hood of my raincoat doesn't fully cover my forehead, so my hair and face are also wet. I arrive at a major intersection near a mall and what my rival high school was growing up. The traffic light at this major intersection changes from red to green for oncoming cars as I stand at a pedestrian crosswalk, telling me I can cross now. I realize that I am no fool about the grand deception at play here. It's all a ruse, based on the symbolism of colors and how each color is inextricable from meanings based on the existence of heaven and hell. Roads are an artificial hindrance to the natural order, and even the heat we turn on in our houses separates us from the cold that God intended for us to experience for a reason. We essentially make our lives too comfy so we don't have to acknowledge God and how He intended the world to be. So here I stand, soaked, and I realize that the red hand is when you should actually use the pedestrian crosswalk if you have faith. I've stopped using my car because it impedes my determining my spiritual path based on the steps and direction created by my own 2 feet. The color black means death, and hence I can no longer touch, much less use my black debit card without being killed. What is worse is that my lab mix, who has black fur, and so I know that there is an implicit threat against me that my dog will eventually be killed as part of this narrative between good and evil. Red equates to danger, and my wallet is red, so if I try to remove my driver's license or another card that can support me, I would have to be very careful not to actually touch the wallet while removing the card, if the card is an acceptable color, that is. The ultimate bad color is green, which means pure evil. It is no coincidence that the color of money is green accordingly. It is near Christmas time, and all I can think about is the wicked irony that the colors of Christmas are red and green, which are the 2 most evil colors there are. The fact that traffic lights use red and green year-round is just another chilling irony that confirms that the use of roads that arbitrarily divvy up the world is in fact an evil practice and a damning choice by humanity. So now that I have to wait until the pedestrian crossing light turns red, which tells me I'm in danger, of course, according to this wicked color scheme, I know I have to walk by faith and risk getting hit. Green is eviler, of course, and trumps red, so my less evil choice is to follow the red hand light ahead of me instead of being influenced or intimidated by responding to the green light. My pace has to be consistent and firm so that I cannot speed up or slow down even for cars. I cannot look up to see if cars are coming either. Another choice of mine is not to wear glasses or my contacts, even though my vision is over 2200. I believe that contacts and corrective eyewear are not intended by God. If I lose my own will, strength, and patience, my eyes over time will correct themselves as if they are the window to my soul. So here I am, seriously nearsighted, crossing a pedestrian walk on red, unable to change speed when the light is green for oncoming cars. I am 32, unmarried, estranged from my family, jobless, and living in a Good Samaritan's home. My hyper-religious delusions and thought processes here are clearly putting me in danger, caused by my third psychotic break. So, as you can see, when I was age 33, my life could not have looked more hopeless. When I came home from the hospital my third time, where I was admitted on my 33rd birthday to the psych ward, there was really not much hope for me. I was given disability papers to sign, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever work again, even though I had just been in a PhD program less than a year before. But here I am today. I have a successful marketing business. I have a family. I ended up getting married after this and having a son when I was 40. And, I defied the odds, but it was not easy. And the emotional suffering involved is something people don't talk about, but I think is a unique kind of pain. And so that's where I segue into my presentation about early recovery from psychosis. Some of the initial emotions after something like this, where your brain has been hijacked, your life has been in danger, you've represented yourself in a bizarre way to people whose opinions matter to you. I think that's also very difficult. Of course, what I've mentioned, the silent shame and secrecy, but bewilderment and embarrassment, hopelessness, uncertainty, pain, and vulnerability. There were in those early days, I didn't care whether I lived or died. It was incredibly painful to think that my life was over, that, my life was ruined, or it just wasn't worth continuing. But I am so thankful that I was patient and did not quit and stuck it out, because I had this whole new life in front of me. I just couldn't see it at the time. One of the most difficult things about psychotic breaks is that you're cognitively damaged afterwards. After my first psychotic break, after doing a partial daytime hospitalization, after the psych ward visit, I was given a global assessment functioning score of 60%, which meant my brain was operating at 60% when I started my PhD program. But so yeah, you're cognitively damaged, you're emotionally vulnerable, but yet you're having to make decisions and face issues that you've never dealt with it probably in your life, where you're in the most difficult situation in your life and you're the least equipped to navigate these huge issues on your own. So first of all, one of the biggest decisions that is consequential for people like me is staying on your antipsychotic. And if you're not well enough, it's hard to stay on one and realize that you need it and make the right decision. So staying on an antipsychotic and choosing which side effects you can accept and live with, because some of the side effects are very intrusive, and I've experienced those myself. Facing a stigmatized diagnosis and coming to terms with it. I thought my life was over when I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Seriously. I thought, oh, it's over now. But I was wrong. The first thing I said to my psychiatrist when he diagnosed me with schizophrenia, I said, no man is ever going to marry me. And that's all I could say. And I just cried, and I was wrong. The guy married me. So, finding the right psychiatrist and counselor. Sometimes you have to find the right fit between therapists, and, hoping that medicines will work for you. About a third of people who take antipsychotics have a good prognosis where they are effective for them. So these are all huge factors. I think the biggest questions you have to ask where you're least equipped to deal with them is, do I have a safe, reliable, affordable place to live? Do I apply for disability? Can I work? I mean, these are huge questions. Before this, of course I could work. I was in a PhD program. I was an excellent student. And all of a sudden, I couldn't do that anymore. And these are huge decisions that you're not equipped at this moment to really make for yourself. What will I pay for hospitalization versus what insurance will cover? Can someone support me financially, or do I have sufficient savings? How much cognitive impairment do I have? How impaired am I? How long will it take for me to heal to where I can be myself again? Am I a burden to others? Living with my parents at 33 was hard, because at that point I thought I would have been independent and had my own life, but everything was put on hold by illness. And how can I trust my thinking and decision making again? A huge part of emotional recovery is trusting and believing in yourself again. My first quasi-psychotic break happened in college, and I had to read an email like 12 times before sending it, even if it was a one-line email, because I wanted to make sure it didn't sound crazy. After my experiences, it took me a long time to feel comfortable with people throwing the word crazy around lightly, but I got used to it. But for a long time, whenever I heard the word crazy, I thought, oh, they're referring to me. And just very sensitive. I've fallen into negative mental traps. And I think that other people, I'm lead facilitator of a NAMI connection support group. And, other people kind of echo similar sentiments. It's easy to fall into negative thinking when you're in this situation and things look so hopeless. Like, I feel like a special case the world has never seen before. Everyone else is normal except for me. My life is hopeless and unfixable. Through my illness, I've missed the boat. No one could possibly understand what I'm going through. And I think a lot of this negative thinking has to do with suffering in silos, because no one talks about this illness. You don't know of anybody else going through something like this, so you have to go through it alone, because no one talks about it because of the stigma. What I learned, because I had a tendency towards negative thinking when I was younger, what I've learned is that positivity is the ultimate defiance to this illness. It really is. And it took me a long time to realize that I felt as long as I had self-pity and anger about it, as long as I had those feelings, that meant it was not okay that this all happened to me and I deserve something better. But it doesn't work that way. Positivity and doing what I'm doing with speaking and writing is the ultimate defiance to this illness. You mess with the wrong person. I'm going to talk about you and make sure no one else is scared of you like I was. So, positive things to think or positive thoughts to replace those negative thoughts with is your life is not over. You can take pride in yourself again. You can heal. You can want to be yourself again and be happy. This could be the end of the life you knew, but there can be a new normal that you can be just as happy with. And you can learn from these experiences and become a better version of yourself. Part of things for me was my biggest fear is that I wouldn't become everything I was ever meant to be because of this illness. But, and then I worried, well, will I ever be the person I was before this illness too? So, but what I've learned is I'll never be the same person as before this illness. But there are parts of me so much more developed and better because of this illness, my compassion, my depth. And I've learned things about myself through all this and what's really important about life and what really is important in life and what's not and what really matters to me. And to me, that offered a lot of clarity. It's hard in those early days to develop a positive outlook because you're only seeing the big tree in front of you and not the forest. You're overwhelmed by pain. You're overwhelmed by shame. You're overwhelmed by this cultural myth that you can't get better from schizophrenia when that's not true. About a third of people, according to the World Health Organization, can recover from schizophrenia. So no matter what anybody tells you, it's not an illness that if you have it, it's not possible to live a good life afterwards and a life that you're proud of and a life that has meaning. So, you are not alone. And as bizarre as your experiences may seem, tens of millions of people around the globe have been through exactly or something similar to what you've been through. 28 million people in this world have schizophrenia. I think one out of 300 people have schizophrenia. So there are plenty of people like us. It's just that no one talks about it because of the stigma. No human being can see the future and see the big picture of your life or the schematic of your life, even you. No matter how hard you think about it, only time and distance can help you put this incident in your life in context with the rest of your life, where you can even begin to see any of the bigger picture. But you will actually never be able to see the full big picture, but you get a better view the further away you move from the illness. No matter how hard you think, no matter how hard you try, only patience and time leads to clarity. And you just have to hold on tight and just wait for positive things to happen to you. Just one positive thing can start the chain of events in your life where things start to fit together again. If you have schizophrenia, you cannot expect other people not to judge you if you judge yourself. It is a lot of times I would judge myself. I would judge the illness, and then I would project my judging onto other people and how other people will feel about it. But you have to let yourself off the hook off first, where you don't judge yourself, because how you project and say things, catches on with other people. You should just be able to say at a certain point, as a matter of fact, I have schizophrenia, and leave it at that. And let someone else figure it out for themselves how they feel about it. A year or two can make a huge difference. In early recovery, every day is a struggle. But you'll be surprised after a psychotic break, and it doesn't have to be schizophrenia. It can be any other reason. There are tons of reasons you can have a psychotic break. But for any of them, a year or two can make a big difference. So it pays to be patient and wait before you make decisions about your life. it's better to try and fail than just give up. I was not a quitter growing up. I was always a very tenacious, competitive, hardworking person. And even when I didn't care if I lived or died, in the end, I couldn't quit. I just had to keep going and just keep trying, because when all is said and done with my life, I rather try and fail. Never dismiss your odds of recovery. There's a lot of clinicians out there who don't believe that you can be doing well if you have schizophrenia. I've had 3 tell me that there's no way I can have schizophrenia because I'm doing so well. And in fact, I never had it if I'm doing this well now. But that is not necessarily true. You can heal from schizophrenia. Part of this, I have a blog on Psychology Today about radical acceptance applied to psychosis, but you have to just embrace your life and circumstances through self-love and self-acceptance. No person's life is perfect. Everyone has their struggles. And the beautiful thing was, when I was at a better place in my life, where friends had always been there for me, when I could be there for my friends, and I realized they were going through battles that I will never probably have to go through. We all suffer, and we can't see ourselves with schizophrenia because of the stigma as having the worst thing that you can possibly have, because it's not. And everything is relative, and everything happens in degrees. We all suffer, and you have to just place your illness in context with your other battles and the battles of other people around you. And I think that gives you a better view into how to accept yourself and your struggles. I think community is everything. The first time that I met someone with schizophrenia in the 12 years since I had been diagnosed is when I joined a connection support group through NAMI Wake County, and NAMI stands for National Alliance for Mental Illness. It was the first time I ever met someone with my diagnosis. So until you meet one other person with your diagnosis, in your head that it's a diagnosis that many people have, but you feel like an anomaly. You feel like you're the only person in the world with this illness, and you're just like this enigma or something. But to actually meet somebody else, all of a sudden you feel normalized. And that's so important. It's just invaluable being part of the support group. And I started out as a facilitator, but it's been just as beneficial to me being a facilitator as it has been beneficial for me to be a facilitator to the other participants. There's no need to suffer in silence, where there's power in community. When we can all just come out and say what we have unapologetically, like it's another medical illness, that would be such great progress for us. And there's so much personal healing when, sharing lived experiences in common with other people. Like one support group session, we all just went around and said our most bizarre occurrence in a psychotic break. And all of a sudden, it's a conversation I never had before, but it was so normalizing. I think it's important that I share what I do, because when it comes to psychosis and having a psychotic break, in some regards, it takes someone who has experienced a psychotic break to really understand what it's like to go through one, because it would be really hard to explain otherwise, and why it is so painful. So an added feature of this presentation, by request of Robin, is that I talk about staying well. So, for a few years there, it was like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. But then I've gotten to a point in recent years, like past over the 8 years, where I'm clear-headed. I don't have any thoughts. I'm fully present. A huge part of that has been EMDR therapy. It has been because I did have complex trauma due to the psychotic breaks that I had. And I have had some moments in acute stress, because I do not handle stress like the average person. And once you have one psychotic break, you're potentially damaged, where you need antipsychotics to help regulate the flow of dopamine. So I have to be very careful in very stressful moments of my life, and where I've had brief moments where I'm like, okay, am I stable right now? Do I need to go home and lay down and maybe call somebody? but I've never really come close to having another break. This past year, I was in the most stressful time of my life, and for the first time, whenever I take antipsychotics, I've never had any symptoms of psychosis, and I haven't had any symptoms of schizophrenia in over a decade, but I was starting to have auditory hallucinations, and I was like, oh no, this is the worst. I have a husband and a son, and there's a lot on the line here. But I did the right thing. I contacted my psychiatrist, even though I had fears like I was getting in trouble for admitting these things. But he just increased my dose, and they went away. So, but reporting things to your doctor as soon as possible. You don't want to believe it's happening, and you don't want to believe it yourself. And once you tell somebody else, it's really happening, but it is really happening whether whether you like it or not. So got to talk to a psychiatrist as soon as you can. Being open to feedback from others, feedback from loved ones really helps. And you have to have feedback from, you have to trust people, even to tell you things that you don't want to hear, and be receptive to it. And I think that's part of staying well too, and not being scared to tell loved ones that what's happening. The first person I tell about anything is my husband. But yeah, I have a website, Emotional Recovery from Psychosis. It's sarahmerrittryan.com. I have all my publications on there. I have prior recordings of webinars on there. I have a full-length memoir, I think I mentioned before, that's represented by a literary agent. I have published poetry, and I'm publishing my first short story, all on mental illness and recovery. It's a very good question if my diagnosis is something that I can pass on to my child. You can have a genetic predisposition, but the current belief is that there has to be environmental triggers that set off that genetic predisposition. And no one in either side of my family, even 3 generations back, has any record of serious mental illness, psychosis, schizophrenia, bipolar, anything. So I don't know if mine was inherited, to be honest. And there's no single biomarker that's agreed on to be schizophrenia yet. So, you can't be tested for this before having a child. And so I do want to help my child avoid mental health issues. But today, mental health in children is becoming an epidemic itself. So I'm not just trying to protect my son from what I have, but just always protecting his mental health in this atmosphere, in this world, with peers, the media, the internet, just always monitoring his mental health for, other conditions too. With cognitive impairment, it's hard to say, but with me, I was cognitively impaired, but time healed it. And also I'm on 2nd generation antipsychotics, which, especially Zyprexa, which has been shown in research to help heal the brain after a psychotic break. So second class antipsychotics have been shown to not only stop another break from happening, they also help heal the mind from previous psychotic breaks. But I think cognitive impairment can run the gamut. For me, thinking on my feet and speaking was very difficult. Like, I went into a PhD program right after that with 60% brain capacity. And, that was very difficult. Some people have more cognitive impairment than others. This one man who contacted me through LinkedIn had a psychotic break from a bad LSD trip, and he had to learn how to read again after it. So, I think my cognitive impairment was more mild compared to other people's. I could still read. I could still remember everything that happened in the psych ward, which is a blessing and a curse. A blessing from my memoir, but a not so good thing otherwise. Other people black out entirely and can't remember any of it. So the cognitive impairment really has to do with the severity of your psychotic break and how long it was happening before you started getting treated. So what exactly is a psychotic break? Well, a psychotic break is not just for people who have issues from here up. Psychotic breaks can happen from thyroid conditions. It can happen from dementia and Alzheimer's. It can happen from drugs, like that causes substance-induced psychosis. And I recently met a woman in her young 20s who had a psychotic break from when she was 10 years old because she had an untreated strep throat. So it just goes to show you that this is not isolated to bipolar schizoaffective, schizophrenia, psychotic disorder not otherwise specified. The psychosis can happen from a number of illnesses, where the brain is one organ that interacts with the rest of the organs in your body. There's no cutoff right here. So in a psychotic break, there's a term called anosognosia, and that anosognosia is a condition where you can no longer tell that you're not well. So the majority of people with anosognosia have schizophrenia, where because of that, people with schizophrenia have the hardest time taking their antipsychotics, because people who don't understand they're ill have a hard time taking medicine, if that makes sense. So a psychotic break is when you lose a break with reality. And psychotic breaks can take many shapes and forms. For me, they were customized to the experiences of my life, where everything was rehashed and mixed into a new reality that was utterly horrifying. But other people have different psychotic breaks. Some people have breaks where they believe there's a conspiracy, or they're under surveillance, or people are trying to kill them, or the government has some conspiracy. I myself, as part of my psychotic break, thought people were trying to kill me twice when I went to the psych ward. And it's, in the movies you see people who are scared people are going to kill them, but in reality, it's so much scarier and so much more damaging to live in that fear and then do the aftermath. And one of the points I want to make here is, even if things are not true or sound bizarre, you're not really experiencing them, but your emotions are experiencing those things. So even after the psychotic break is over, those things aren't real. You still deal with the emotional reality of what you experienced, because those were your real emotions that you're experiencing. How do I recognize a psychotic break in someone? I think that is hard because a psychotic break can build up insidiously over time. Someone can seem totally normal and fully functional while these new thoughts or elements of the break are creeping in. So I was in a master's degree doing great while these thoughts were creeping in. But it wasn't until anosognosia, this one moment, that I switched over where I couldn't tell between reality anymore. So it's not something where someone's totally great 100% and then bam, it happens. I mean, in my experience, it was something very insidious that built up over time, where part of it seemed normal until those elements became part of a full-blown psychotic break. So sometimes you can't tell, especially in someone who carries themselves well and knows how to have a facade, or knows how to keep their poker face on. It can be hard to tell. It doesn't have to make a first appearance when you're a young person. I know people that got their first psychotic break in their 50s or 60s. It doesn't have to happen at that classic age between 20 and 30. You can have a psychotic break at any time in your life. Like that one person I know who had one when she was 10 years old. I can't even begin to imagine how you process something like that at 10 years old. And hallucinogenic drugs, I think, can bring on an episode. That man told me about his LSD episode. My first episode was brought on. I was overprescribed Adderall, where I was prescribed 60 milligrams a day for a year. And I had a substance-induced psychosis because of that. And that kickstarted the rest of my illness. And there is research now out there that shows the likelihood of getting there is research showing that substance-induced psychoses can develop into schizophrenia. They say so about marijuana, but there's also evidence of amphetamines doing the same thing. The question is, what steps would you recommend to a parent who witnesses their child having a psychotic break? I would say that most people are not equipped to handle their child having a psychotic break on their own. It is really hard to have any control over someone living in a different reality, potentially living with a lot of fears. And you can't reason with them. And I think that's the hardest part to understand. If your loved one has a psychotic break, there is no reasoning with them once they've reached the point of anosognosia and can't tell the difference between reality. And their reality is just as 100% real as your reality. But I think every parent must decide, do I take my child to the ER? Is it time? But the mental health landscape since I was last ill has changed a lot. So at that same time, I'm not the one to advise you on the current landscape and what the options are and what the policies are now once you take someone to the ER or to the psych ward, because things have changed a lot. Do I have any precursor signs or symptoms for psychotic breaks? Yes. High irritability, like a temper, easily angry, things easily make me mad. And if I see that coming, and it hasn't happened really that often, but if it does, I'm like, whoa, okay, I got to watch out here. Probably should call my psychiatrist, tell my husband about this, tell my mom. But so far, I haven't come that close to having another break. And, and the beautiful thing is that my life is better, is the best my life has ever been, to be honest. I'm more happy in my life and more content. And, this illness, is devastating, cognitively and emotionally. But I'm really happy that I can come through to the other side of this and be able to articulate the thoughts and feelings of people who go through this to help other people like me. And that's why I do it.
Okay, thank you. What a wonderful story of hope and resilience. I hope you were as inspired by it as I was. I look forward to reading your book, Sarah. So you'll let us know when that's out and ready. Okay, wonderful. Do you have a title yet?
Threads of Truth.
Threads of Truth. Okay, thank you. And stay tuned to our website, welcomingwellnessnc.com, to find out who our speaker is going to be for that. Our services, of course, are free to the public, but there is a big, nice Donate Now button on that website, and if you have found value and would care to make a donation, we would be happy to accept that. Thank you for joining us today. Please take good care of your mental health and have a good afternoon. Thank you.